join us now?
Absolutely, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. And if you keep talking, we'll be able to see you there. There you are. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, great. Wow. So I want to talk about both of your labs, but let's start first with your bone biomechanics lab. I'm guessing that's where you are right now.
Yes, I'm actually here in the lab. So hopefully you can see me. There's a big green donut behind me. That's our PQ-CT scanner, which is a research grade CT scanner.
And so tell me a little bit about that piece of equipment. How did you acquire it? Who uses it besides you? Is it available to the whole university, to outside? Tell me about it.
Absolutely. So a research grade PQ-CT scanner is the same kind of technology as a CT scanner, like one that you would have any type of kind of medical screening done on, except this is designed just for smaller parts and pieces or animals or whatever you want to put in there, whatever can fit in that donut. So there's lots of applications. I've got some fabulous colleagues in exercise science that are working with me, but of course, anybody that's a biologist that maybe wants to put some sort of animals in there, anything that you have an interest in studying the inside of, a CT scanner can capture that.
So what I like so much about your research, Alice, is that it's interdisciplinary. So you're the video, and just then you talked about other folks around campus that you're working with, but you also hit one of our interdisciplinary themes, which is human development and well-being, which is wonderful. Tell me something that you have learned about the skeleton, since that's your specialty, that the average person like me would not know.
Well, the thing that gets me nerdy and excited is this idea that the skeleton changes throughout your life. It's an organ system, just like your liver is. You know, especially during COVID, we may have all been using and abusing our livers. But the organ system of the skeleton adapts during your whole life. So you don't just get one version of it. So everything you do, from typing on your computer, even watching TV, going for a walk, anything you do physically in life has an effect and changes the size and shape of your bones, which I just think is so cool, because we think of them as these really hard tissues that you just get the one version of, you just get a blueprint of, but they're in fact changing your whole life. It turns over every couple of months, which is wild to me.
So who is interested in funding this type of research, and what are the specific areas that you are investigating?
So I have two streams coming out of this lab, two research areas of interest. One is more on the basic side. I'm very much interested in what our bones can tell us about past populations. So individuals in the past didn't always leave written records of the types of activities they did, but they did leave behind their bones. And so if we can look at the bones of modern people who we know what they were doing, we can compare them to those in the past and get a sense of who and what these people did. And the NSF is a great funding source for that type of research. On the applied side, obviously there's a lot of health benefits to looking at your bones and studying your bones. So we are developing a proposal for the NIH that really looks at bone density and bone quality in their forearm, because your forearm is one of those places that if you go to the doctor for, say, an osteoporosis screening, they're going to look at your forearm to take that measurement and prescribe you medicine based on that measurement. So we want to expand the number, types of folks that data contributes to, rather than just having a more homogeneous sample, which is what most medications are based off of now.
And the video talked about some students, but can you talk about that in particular? Is it only undergrads? Do you have graduate students? Is it just in humanities and social science, or do you look for students outside your field?
Oh, absolutely outside my field. In fact, most of them I keep drawing them over from biology, but and exercise science as well. Very interdisciplinary work. So we have undergraduate students doing independent research, independent projects, either for course credit or as more of a shadowing opportunity. And then I have graduate students. I have one doctoral student at the University of Tennessee right now. So we are open to everybody.
And that was going to lead into my next question. You mentioned the student from University of Tennessee. What kind of collaborators do you have from other universities?
One of my closest collaborators, and actually I've been working with him for years, but he's up at Johns Hopkins. They have a similar machine up there as this CT scanner, but these are few and far between. So actually we probably only have the only one in the Southeast. So I've had some folks at Emory sniffing around that we are trying to get back in touch with. But it's definitely a one of a kind, a really low grade radiation to get some absolutely fantastic information from the inside of your body.
So if I'm from Emory or some other university in the Southeast, how do I get access to this machine, or can I get access to the machine?
Absolutely. So the easiest thing to do is just reach out to me. You can go to my faculty webpage or reach out through our department or through you. There's many ways to find me, but what we would do is just sit down and collaborate on ideas where we see this research going. And then in terms of time and space, you know, it doesn't move quickly. It's a CT scanner, so it moves pretty slowly. So you've got to think about sample sizes and things like that. Those are all the types of questions that I ask collaborators when they're pre-planning a project.
And at this point in the show, we would be transitioning.
That's okay. I have all Michael's materials.
But we're not transitioning to Michael. So just for the rest of you to kind of know what we had planned here, the beauty of what this was going to be, we were going to transition to Michael McClung, who's a colleague of Alice Gooding, and he's currently at the Forensic Anthropology Field Lab, and we were going to do an on-site interview with him, but either we're having trouble with his internet or the field station internet or something is happening and we can't quite get to him, which is unfortunate. But Alice, I know you know the answers to all the questions, so that's fine. And then we also had a few pictures that I think that will start rolling in a second too. So, but let me just start, because we're moving away from your bone biomechanics lab and switching over to another whole field of research. Just give me an overview of how you even got interested in this field of forensic anthropology, and how is it that you are doing what you're doing now as a practitioner? So not the academic side, but your practitioner side.
Right. So when I was getting my master's, I shadowed the state forensic anthropologist at the time, and I found this field, which was relatively new, but it was this field where you could study anatomy, but you didn't have to be a doctor, because I didn't want to talk to any living patients. My patients don't talk back to me. So what I did is decide to go on to study that. But when I came back to Georgia, I was contacted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and they needed someone in the state to handle the 150 something counties that we have in our state as the state forensic anthropologist. So I adopted that role. And then as time went on, I realized, as I was traveling all over the state to help recover bodies at various different types of crime scenes, I realized that our partners in law enforcement didn't have any specialized training in how to assist me. They were all just kind of standing around wanting to help, but didn't have the background or the education that they needed. And so what we did is start a body farm, if you will, at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, or GIPSTIC, which is down in Forsyth, Georgia. And we've actually created 2 training facilities down there. But that's quite a drive for us. And so Evelina had a great spark of an idea that we could perhaps move this whole operation, this training in clandestine grave recovery, up here to the field station. And that's how we ended up where we are.
So I would love to know, this just fascinates me completely. I've seen lots of things on TV. I'd like to know kind of the process from when you all get involved to what it is that you do. And maybe we can have Heather put up the pictures. I don't think there's anything, gory in these pictures, but I did just wanted to make sure that we put out a warning. We didn't want children watching if this will be.
No.
Okay, great.
So we collected some photographs here just to show you from various crime scenes that we've been on. Essentially what happens is when someone goes missing, law enforcement has to figure out not only where they are and what happened to them, but one of those big components is where did the body end up? Are they in the woods? Are they buried? Are they underwater? What has happened? And so what they'll do once they do their investigation is figure out a couple of different locations that might be of interest. And then we have trained a good number of folks across the state on how to locate human remains at that site. If they find human remains, then I'll go down, I take Michael with me, and we will go down to the scene, as it were, and run a full-scale excavation of the remains. Some of these photos are from individuals that have done some training with us down at Gypstick. And you can see that they're actually about to uncover remains in the ground. And we use pigs, deceased pigs, because we don't have a donation program set up, but all sorts of different archaeological techniques that the attendees learn. And what we're trying to do is get them out of the habit of just going in the ground and digging something up, but in fact, using a slow, scientific, rigorous process that will preserve a lot of the context and information about how someone was dumped or discarded or buried or other nefarious activities that happen.
You're on mute, Phaedra.
Sorry, it was a brilliant question.
Oh, okay. Ask it again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't repeat it, but what is the science that you're doing? So, you're not the only people in the world who are investigating or doing this type of research, but where is your contribution to the field?
Absolutely. So there's a few body farms, that term isn't always well appreciated, but there are a few of those type of facilities all over the United States. The most famous one, I think, at the University of Tennessee, where I got my doctorate. And those facilities are primarily concerned with studying the decomposition of human remains with time, because in varying climates that changes. But they're already doing that. So we're going to do something else. Our interest is primarily in investigating some of the methods for even finding human remains in the first place, because you can't just go around with a backhoe and scoop up an entire area of earth that you think someone might be in. So the study that we were about to start right before everything fell apart is a really low-tech, easy method that's actually been used for years, and I'll kind of not say too much about it, but essentially what it does is detect anomalies under the ground. And if those anomalies could be detected, it could be possible to find someone that is buried underneath the ground.
So will you explain to me who are you training not in the COVID-19 world where things have changed, right? But what is your plan for when you're training, who you're training? What does that look like?
We have a fantastic partnership with the College of Professional Education, and we've developed 5 courses, 5 different courses with different topics for coroners, law enforcement officers, death investigators, medical legal examiners, pathologists, and even high school teachers that teach forensic science, because what you have is a whole community of folks, of educators that are tasked with teaching the new sexy forensic science, but they are not practitioners. And so we want to be able to give our K through 12 folks a little extra boost and a little bit more education on their part so they can take it back to the classroom. So we actually have a whole series of summer courses that eventually we'll be offering through the College of Professional Education.
That's great. And my final question before I open it up to the audience is, I know what the spot looks like before you all came in. The field station is it's a clean slate, sort of. Maybe you'll differ with me on that, but what did you have to do to get up and running for your lab there?
I'll have to give all the credit to our students who, without even knowing the full scope of what we were planning, and we didn't even know at the time, have really put in over 100 hours of work to turn a completely abandoned, it was a fully operational chicken house. So we lovingly call it the Roost, but it's now our command center. We've gutted that out entirely. The chickens were long gone, but we have reclaimed essentially that entire space. We've set up a field, I believe you saw in the video, a big open grassy field, and that's actually got quite a few burials in it. And those burials are what we're testing the that low-tech technology over. And then we also have a big wooded area. These are some before pictures you can see of, it looks, you know, heavily overgrown. And this is what it looks like today. Actually, we took those photos just a few days ago, excuse me. You can just see that this was an operational chicken house, and you couldn't even really see the edges of it. But what we've done is convert the inside of it and the field area in front of it and the fenced area behind it. The fenced area behind it is what we're calling kind of a boneyard. There's the chicken coop. In the boneyard area is where we have full bodies that are buried, and that's kind of the training or the education area. And that's the inside of the coop now, which serves as an office or a place to run inside while you're teaching a course if you need to get out of the rain, that kind of thing. Of course, there was lots of fencing and protection when there were chickens out there, but we've taken a good bit of that down so that it's a clean slate. It looks professional. It looks like a place you'd want to come have continuing education and that you'd be getting some real expertise in.
So what are you going to do now? You had these classes prepared for May or the summer. What is the plan?
The current plan is to wait every single day and see what the change is going to be coming from the Gold Dome. If we are allowed to, I'd like to test run some of the courses this summer. I did have a Maymester scheduled with students. Unfortunately, that won't be possible anymore. It's not really something that's easily able to be transitioned online. But I think as long as we're allowed, it's a pretty open space. There's not a lot of human close contact. So I think depending on the situation, we may do a couple test runs this summer, what kind of one-day courses, and see what the feedback is like and see what the interest level is. Yeah,
great. Okay, well, I know that there's probably many people who have questions they're dying to ask, so we're gonna just turn it over. Again, use your chats, send in a question if you want, or just chime in right now.
This is Ian Ferguson. Since there was a blinding silence, I thought I would at least ask a question to get started. So most of the bodies you look at forensically, are these bodies that were recently disposed into the ground, or is it bodies that have tended to be there for a period of time, or is it a mixture? And then what's the difference in looking for that, where one might be recent compared to something that might be a little bit more historical?
Absolutely, that's a great question. There's always a mix. Forensically speaking, in terms of prosecuting someone for causing a death, it's usually about a 50-year range. So if you died more than 50 years ago, it tends not to be investigated. So really a 50-year range, which is obviously constantly moving as time goes forward. But it all depends on the environment in which you died in or you're dumped in. So you could, if you die in the middle of the summer, in Georgia, it's incredibly hot and you will decompose quite quickly, which will make your bones essentially look older, like they've been out there longer than someone who perhaps died in the winter where it takes longer to decompose.
Great question. And I almost called on you, Ian, because I knew you were out there and I knew you would have a question.
Thank you very much.
Here's a question, Alice, that's come in. What specific kind of training will law enforcement and medico-legal professional receive at FAFL?
So the courses that we have set up are in basic bone identification is one of them, helping them to differentiate between human and animal bone, because that's one of the things all week, every week, I get text messages from across the state. Hey, can you identify this bone? So one of them will be in basic bone identification. One of the courses will be centered on basic survey and mapping. So if someone has been dumped in the woods or animals have gotten to their body, their remains are often scattered all over the place. And so what we want to teach our partners in law enforcement is to not only go around and pick up those bones, but to map the scene properly in a way that can be reconstructed for a jury later on. And then of course we will have a more advanced course for those who want to learn how to actually excavate a body.
Here's a question that came in on chats. Alice, this is a great one. Do film or TV groups know of your research and or ask you to be a subject matter expert?
They have in the past. Most I say no to, just because of some biases that occur in journalism, like a court TV shows. Sometimes that's not a great idea, but I'm also representing the state and I'm representing KSU. So I'm very choosy about saying yes to those kind of things.
You answered that so carefully. So thank you for that. Here's a question. Ooh, they're coming in fast. Will canines be used at all in your training in terms of location?
I do work closely with a couple of cadaver dog groups in the state and in the Southeast. We have actually had them to KSU before, not with the dogs, just the trainers, to do some bone identification. I'm open to the idea, but we'd have to talk a little bit further because we don't have human bodies in the ground at the field station. We have pig bodies. I do have some human remains, but the dogs need to be trained on human material rather than animal material. And so that's something we'd have to work out in the future.
Next question in, do you think your bone research will lead to new treatments for osteoporosis? And please say yes.
I really hope so, because one of our biggest concerns is that a lot of these medications and these standards for treatment are based on folks that are your average person, which is great for all the average people. But if you are even mildly active, if you recreationally play tennis or something, golf even in your later years, your bones look different, and you should have a treatment plan that is structured around those nuances. And so that's something that we really want to tease out and show that there's a need for.
Great, thank you. This is an interesting one. There's been a great deal of renewed interest in the cases of the missing and murdered children of Atlanta from the 70s and early 80s. Are there new technologies and advancements from your fields that could be brought to bear in a renewed investigation?
Yes, actually, we just presented a big conference presentation in February at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences on the work that we're doing with all the unidentified juvenile remains that are housed at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. We've actually been scanning them in this CT scanner. You saw a picture, a computer screen picture of a remodeled skull using a 3D modeling technique after they've been scanned. And so we're going to be doing a formal burial of all of these remains, but then these 3D models will exist in perpetuity so that a forensic artist could reconstruct what this child may have looked like. And then we could continue the investigation long after they've been buried. And so there is actually passed legislation 4 years ago now. So we've been working on this project for about 3 years that we can rebury all these unidentifieds and go back to all of those cold cases, essentially. So that's actually a very timely question without you even knowing it.
And can I just say, Alice, that you're really cool? I mean, honestly. I mean, seriously, you're doing work that is so important, and it's not research for research's sake. It's research that has meaning for our community. So that's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, can bones be used to identify remains outside of dental records?
Heck yes, that's my whole job.
I thought so, but I thought that we should put that out there.
So the core job of a forensic anthropologist is to use all of the skeleton to figure out the age you were at which you died, biological sex, your ancestral background, and how tall you would have been. So we call that the biological profile, those 4 components, and we can tell those from your bones.
If I'm a student and I want to, again, I think the layperson only knows the TV version of bones and that kind of thing. But if I'm a student and I really want to become Alice when I grow up, what do I need? What? but what is that student really going to have to learn? Like what's the practical part of your job?
So one of the I heard a student last year call me Dr. Dream Crusher, which I took as a compliment because I'm very realistic about the expectations of this field and encouraging them to focus on the scientific aspects. They need to have a good background in statistics. They need to take biology courses. They need to have an anthropological background. There is so much time and effort that goes into this field. It's not something that you can just drop into. And it's also highly competitive. And so what I want to do with those students, and that kind of conversation actually forces the cream to the top, really. And those students have all opportunities open to them to shadow me on the job. They can, of course, now come to our fabulous new facility and get hands-on training. So they're not just taking classes, they're actually physically doing the work and building a CV that makes them very competitive.
Hi, Alice. It's Dorothy Marcel. How are you?
Hi, Dorothy.
I was not able to listen to the first part of your talk, but I did want to ask about collaboration. So are you doing any sort of collaborative work with other universities like UT's Body Farm? Or, yeah.
So we do have a collaboration currently using the CT scanner, a doctoral student at the University of Tennessee. And then I've also got some folks up at Johns Hopkins and at some other universities that are working from afar with us.
Okay.
Collaborations right now out at the field station, I really need a soil scientist. So if there's any soil scientists out there, please reach out to me. I need some soil analysis done. But I am absolutely open to collaborations.
Great. And is that some kind of pipeline maybe for our students to go into graduate work at other schools?
Absolutely. So some of my best, most awesome students, I've got one at Louisiana State University right now doing a master's, another one up at Boston, another one down in Florida working on her PhD. So making those connections, if you're interested in graduate school, can absolutely be done. But then the other thing is graduate school isn't for everyone. And so what I encourage students to do is to shadow these officers that come in and take training courses. We want them to be rubbing elbows with professionals in the field to ask those questions like, how do I even get started? Or what would you be looking for on my resume? Because not everybody is destined to be an academic, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thanks.
Other questions that people want to ask in person?
Hi, Alice. This is Youre.
Hi.
How are you? Great presentation. I find your forensic work fascinating, and I've told you that before. But can you talk a little bit more about the work in regards to the physical activity and how the bone structure changes with time, and how can we really address that with the physical activity part?
Absolutely. So as you know, And for others, Youre and I are interested in addressing some of these larger questions about activity and changes to not just bone density, which is something that gets studied quite a lot. And we've seen that, and that's kind of been done. What we want to now address are questions in bone shape. A lot of times these studies are done on like college or collegiate level athletes, which is great, but those are young, healthy, tend to be men and tend to be a homogeneous sample in terms of ethnicity. So looking at older populations and looking at how bones change with time is super important, because the skeleton is just not as malleable the older you get. I think we all feel that as our knees are clicking off if we get off the couch, right? So the degree to which bone is still plastic and malleable with time needs to be documented. That's really where the gap is.
Thanks for that question, Youre. We have another one on chats, which is, this is a great question. What are some common mistakes coroners make in death investigations?
Is this a coroner asking, or do we have any coroners on the?
I don't think it's a coroner, but don't hold me to it. Oh, it's a former crime reporter, however.
Okay. I think mistakes just often happen as a result of external pressures for expediency, and we all feel that. Get the case done, figure out what happened, get it prosecuted. So you constantly have this somebody on your back that needs you to hurry up. And I think the faster we go through a case and we start throwing some of those tedious scientific methods out the window just to get things done, I think that's the window when mistakes happen.
Other questions? In-person questions?
This is Ian again. So do bones absorb poisons and other things? So for example, I've worked with arsenic a lot in terms of growing semiconductor materials. So you'll see it in the urine almost immediately. If somebody's been poisoned, you'll see it in the hair. I believe that if men are killed very often, it's ethylene glycol is used. Don't get any funny ideas.
Oh,
so my question is, in terms of the bones, if it's a death that's accumulative or fast, would you see something like that either in the bone or the marrow if it was still around?
That's a great question. It all depends on the length of exposure, because we know that bone turns over or develops new bone and resorbs the old bone at a certain rate. And those rates are affected with things like age and other factors. So if you've been slowly ingesting something for a really long time, then there is a good chance that it will end up being traceable, at least in your bones. One study I am working on through the George Beard investigation is isotope analysis of unidentified remains. What we're looking at is to find isotopic signatures in the bones that can tell us where their drinking water came from. So if you've been drinking water from the tap, or even actually bottled water your whole life, we can actually trace, using your bones, figuring out where that water source came from, and that can give us a sense of where you lived during your life, which may narrow down who a missing person may be.
Does that work for whiskey? That's a Scottish question.
I don't know, but I probably have some Chardonnay in my bones. So.
And that's we'd like to have all of our shows tie together, so that's a nice tie-in to last week's Geography of Beer show. We have a couple of other questions that are coming through on chats, but I want to see if there's any live questions first. Okay, I'll ask a few of these. One I think you answered, but but I'll ask it anyway because it's a good one, which is the scanner that you use, Alice, is it a low dose of radiation, and how does it compare? And if it is, how does it compare to what we might have in the doctor's office?
It is absolutely an extremely low dose. So about 3 feet or a meter from the center of this turquoise donut here, there's no detectable radiation. And whatever's inside the donut, so if your arm's in there, your leg's in there, whatever's in the center of the donut is only receiving the amount of radiation that you would get, say, from a plane flight, maybe Atlanta to New York. So it's very low radiation dose.
And another question is, what kind of activities are you able to do at the field station that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise? I imagine burying pig bones is part of the answer.
Yeah, most of the goo and the gore, but actually just having the physical outdoor space is so key, because at the field station we have a very large open field, as you saw. We have that fenced boneyard, and then behind all of that, we actually have a wooded area. And so there's multiple different types of environments that we can set up, not only experimental research, but also develop for training purposes. So it's actually just the outdoor physical space that is really, really nice to have.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up. I just want to thank you very much, Alice, for everything that you're doing. It's terribly exciting. It checks all the boxes for things that we're trying to do here with your involvement with students, interdisciplinary, just the practitioner versus the academics versus the research. That intersection is really amazing. So we really thank you, and I am very sorry that your colleague could not join us today.
Oh,
but that's okay. We'll see. Well, he was in the video, so
yeah.
in some ways he was participating, so that's good. So again, thank you very much, and again, thank you to my staff who is working really hard to get these shows going every week. We are working remotely, but we are working harder than we ever have before. So I really do want to have a nice big shout out to both Joelle and Heather, who are doing a lot for us on this. Hey, next week we've got an exciting show too. So next week we want to call all the math nerds out there, of which I am one. And we're going to have a great show featuring, this is an interdisciplinary team featuring Brett Katzman, who is an economist over in Coles College of Business, and Sean Ellermeyer, who is a mathematician in the College of Science and Math. And if you thought you knew how auctions work, then you are wrong, because we're going to learn from Brett and Sean which auctions work well and why, and which auctions don't work well and why. And so it's a completely different topic than what we talked about today, but it's going to be equally as exciting. And I encourage you and challenge you to join us next Friday. So again, on behalf of the Office of Research, we want you to be safe and healthy and happy. And thank God it's Friday, and a big toast to you all. I don't have anything in my hand, but have a great weekend, and we will see you here next Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, it was great.
Thank you, Alice. Wonderful.